Scripture commands us to care for foreigners. And I think of Deuteronomy 10 and Leviticus 19, where God says to love foreigners as ourselves, for we were foreigners before. And when we ignore commands in the Bible, we lose out on the chance to obey the scripture, and obedience brings blessing. And so I think fundamentally we can start at a point of saying, well, we are commanded as Christians to care for the vulnerable. And then there's this point about our identity. I look at Hebrews chapter 11, verses 13 to 16, and in Hebrews 11, there's this hall of fame, people who trusted in God, who did not receive the things that were promised, but saw them and welcomed them from a distance. And then the scripture says that they were foreigners and strangers on earth. And so there's this identity piece where we are like foreigners and strangers on earth. There are multiple scriptures that identify us as being foreigners as well. And I think when we become too comfortable in our home countries, when we feel like we have a claim on the land, we have a claim on our citizenship, we lose sight of the fact that in scripture, we have a spiritual identity actually as foreigners and strangers too. And then there's this eschatological hope and longing that is also mentioned in Hebrews 11. It mentions that when those people of faith had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return, but instead they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. Caring for the strangers, embracing migration, it reminds us of that eschatological longing that we also have for a quote unquote better country, a heavenly home. And then there's the formation piece. I used to train volunteers, and I would talk about some of the inconveniences of being on a welcome team for refugees. You know, there's cultural misunderstandings. You often have to drive really far. Things take a really long time. And I would say being inconvenienced is good for your soul. Welcoming the stranger, being in cross-cultural spaces where you don't feel very in charge and in control of things, these things are good for your soul. It is part of how God is shaping us to be more compassionate, more patient, more loving, and more humble, to be in spaces where we are being challenged to care for people from different backgrounds who've gone through persecution, who have great needs.